like I said, even before Bret Hart was a big name, you could tell that he was going to get big because he had the greasy hair, the physique, the pink and black, the sunglasses, the charisma, and all the women loved him. So even when he was a mid-carder, you took one look at him and was like, oh, yep, that's it. He's going to get big. He's the one. Back in the 80s and 90s, you could just look at some of these wrestlers and be like, oh, yep, that's it. He's the one. He's going to get big. But the sad thing is, I can't see that with today's wrestlers anymore. When I look at today's pipeline of wrestlers in NXT and ROH, all I see is a bunch of scrawny little 5'2" cosplay geeks. They don't have that Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels characteristic. They don't have that Rock, Hulk Hogan characteristic. I'm going to say something that's probably going to blow the minds of wrestling fanboys. I was with a group of friends that grew up on wrestling. I mean, they had all the stuff. They had the NWO shirts, the Stone Cold posters, the Attitude Era merchandise. They had all the stuff. Now, here's the part that will probably blow the minds of fanboys. They have no idea who Becky Lynch is. No clue, right? I'm like, well, obviously you know who The Rock and Hulk Hogan are, right? And they're like, yeah, of course. And you know who John Cena and Batista are, right? They're like, yeah, we know who he is. But you don't know who Becky Lynch is. And they're like, no, who the hell is she? Right? That probably blows the minds of fanboys because they're not the only ones. The idea that millions of people, including wrestling fans, have no idea who the hell Becky Lynch is probably just blows the minds of wrestling fans. They're probably thinking like, how is that possible? She was in so many main events. She was on the cover of the video game. How can people not know who she is? It's because you're stuck in the wrestling bubble. The pink bubble I talked about in my last video. In your world, people love the geeky cosplay wrestlers. In your world, Becky Lynch is one of the biggest names in entertainment. But outside that wrestling bubble, people couldn't care less about these vanilla jobbers. They simply do not have the broad appeal of guys like The Rock and Hulk Hogan. Now, do you really think this appeals to the mainstream audience? This guy looks like he's from 2005. He looks like he walked into a Hot Topic and walked out looking like that. He skateboards down to the ring and look at the size of this guy. He's smaller than the referee. He looks like a scrawny little fan who's wearing leggings and he's confronting a real wrestler. Is this supposed to be some kind of joke? Now, in the fanboy bubble, these guys are appealing. But what do you think the mainstream audience is thinking when they see these guys? People don't want to see these tiny little jobbers bouncing around in the ring looking like two chihuahuas fighting each other like, psh, 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 psh. No! They want big! They want Goliath! They want Behemoth! They want the Juggernaut versus the Incredible Hulk! Like, and the ground comes flying up. That's what they want! The Clash of the Titans! Not these little chihuahuas. No! People want big! They want... This is what they want to see. The biggest and the baddest smashing each other to find out who the real champ is. This is what they want to see. But these days, this is what they're given to see. In my opinion, when the mainstream audience sees Tessa Blanchard versus Brian Cage, this is what they see. The size difference is absurd, but fanboys want us to accept this as a 50-50 match. And you wonder why nobody watches wrestling anymore. Speaking of Tessa Blanchard is a small, 5'5", 120-pound wrestler with limited mic skills that has been absurdly beating up bigger and more muscular wrestlers, and the fanboys are somehow eating it up. They're acting like she's a top star. When she left Impact Wrestling, they were moaning about how Impact lost one of its biggest draws. What the hell are they talking about? Who the hell even knows who Tessa Blanchard is? She has neither the size, the physique, the charisma, or the look of someone like The Rock, and unlike Chyna beating up muscular wrestlers, her matches against bigger wrestlers are totally unconvincing. And on top of that, she has that long jaw. She looks like the art style of Mega Turrican for Sega Genesis. And nobody likes the art style of Mega Turrican for Sega Genesis. I was talking to those same friends about how wrestlers today don't seem to look anything like wrestlers from back in the day. And one of my friends had a guess. His guess was that it's because they come from different places. Wrestlers back in the day, they were legitimate tough guys. They came from the bar. They came from the gym. They were bouncers at nightclubs. They were like these big, jacked up tough guys that were introduced to the wrestling, so the locker room was filled with these alpha males. But today's wrestlers, they don't come from the gym. They don't come from the nightclub. They come from Comic-Con. They come from GameStop at the mall. Right? Today's wrestlers look like a bunch of little cosplay geeks that grew up on those wrestlers, and now they're trying to be like them, except they're sucking because they're half the size and they're being super nerdy about it. There is nothing larger than life about wrestlers that look like they came straight out of GameStop or Hot Topic. Wrestlers are supposed to be larger than life, but the geeky personalities of some of these wrestlers undermines that. Seth Rollins had every chance to be the face of the WWE. But instead of assuming that larger-than-life role, he's online like, oh, why don't we compare bank accounts? Oh, you're just jealous because she's with me, which completely undermines the larger-than-life image. Someone who's larger-than-life shouldn't be saying stuff like that. I mean, who cares what online people think? A big star should be above that. Sadly, it seems like some of Seth Rollins' nerdy personality is rubbing off on Becky Lynch. I was at a wrestling event and Seth Rollins was fighting someone. I forgot who. But anyway, I was booing Seth Rollins and cheering the other guy. And I wasn't being a disruption. I was just booing and cheering, just like all the other wrestling fans. So I'm booing Seth Rollins when suddenly Becky Lynch walks by me, giving me an evil glare. Like, I'm like, what? I'm just booing and cheering just like any wrestling fan. She's supposed to be this big WWE star, yet she's glaring down fans just because they're booing someone she doesn't want to get booed? That's so petty. That's not being larger than life. So what happens if there's a wrestling event and there's 1,000 people booing Seth Rollins? Is she going to go give the evil glare to all of them? Like, you know, that's so petty. That's so, in my opinion, beneath her. She's supposed to be this big WWE star. I don't think she used to be like this. I think it's just some of Seth Rollins' nerdy personality rubbing off on her. Let me be clear. I have nothing against cosplay, video games, or nerdiness. It's just that when I go to a wrestling event, I'm not going there for that. Let me put it this way. If I go to a Metallica concert, do I want the band members coming out dressed up like Japanese schoolgirls? No, because I'm not going there for that. I'm going there for a heavy metal concert, not geeky cosplay stuff. And the same is true for wrestling. When I go to a wrestling event, I'm going there for big, charismatic, larger-than-life characters. The Rock, Stone Cold, Hulk Hogan. I'm not going for these little cosplay geeks, right? Just because I don't want wrestlers and Metallica dressing up like Japanese schoolgirls doesn't mean I'm anti-cosplay. It just means that when I go to those events, I'm not going there for that. And neither are most mainstream audiences. Video gamers know about the video game crash of 1984. When you think about it, it's kind of surprising that the wrestling industry hasn't crashed yet. I mean, think about the similarities. An oversaturation of mediocre product, emerging alternatives like the UFC and arm wrestling, a lack of customer confidence. I mean, we have no trust that storylines are going to go anywhere. And the least viewership of all time. I mean, it's come to the point where we have these skinny little cosplay geeks bouncing around in the ring and not even taking it seriously. It's kind of surprising that wrestling hasn't crashed yet. As you know, after video games crashed in 1984, it was then reborn and made better. And maybe that's what wrestling needs. Wrestling has so jumped the shark that maybe what it needs is just a total reboot. But one of the reasons why this jump the shark wrestling product continues to go on is because it's being propped up by about 700,000 neckbeard fanboys who keep supporting it no matter how crappy the product is. Look. An indie wrestler doesn't even need the mainstream audience to be successful. He or she can just live in that pink wrestling bubble, feeding off the neckbeard fanboys. Kenny Omega does not need the mainstream audience. He can just go to indie shows, go to fan fests, where hundreds of neckbeards line up to pay him $40 for an autograph. So, If 100 fanboys line up, that's $4,000 right there. He doesn't need the mainstream audience. And that's what today's wrestlers seem to be going for. They're over there on Twitch wearing their geeky anime t-shirts, pandering to these fanboys who throw money at those wrestlers for no reason. And while all this is happening, the wrestling product grows to be more and more of this niche little product that's unpalatable to mainstream audiences. It would be so awesome if these fanboys finally came to their senses, if they woke up one morning and finally thought to themselves, what the hell am I doing? Well, why am I supporting these jobbers dancing around in the ring? Imagine if they finally came to their senses. Imagine if these 700,000 fanboys stopped watching AEW, stopped watching NXT, stopped watching Raw, and stopped watching SmackDown. It would be so awesome because the pink bubble would finally burst. Wrestling viewership would crash and wrestling promotions would have no choice but to finally offer us a higher quality product that appeals to a wider range of audiences. Imagine how good it could be to finally have a real product again instead of this nerdy cosplay crap. It would be such a sight for sore eyes.